We are awaiting Putin's response in retaliation for what the Ukraine side launched into the bomber fleet of Russia just a couple of days ago. It's been talked about a lot. We've had a lot of shows on talking about the fallout, et cetera. But now then we're having a bigger and a more direct statement out of both the Kremlin and the White House, for that matter, that something is coming. And we're going to find out exactly what that means. And we're going to see how it fits in together with all these other kinds of efforts to both bring the war to an end, to have some kind of negotiated settlement, because there's all kinds of things on the map and they kind of are going in, if not opposite directions, their own directions. And we're going to see how all this fits together. And we have back with us, we hadn't had him on for a while, Patrick Henningsen, geopolitical analyst, journalist, and host of the Sunday Wire and 21stCenturyWire.com. Patrick, welcome back. It's been a while.
It's great to be with you, Daniel. Hope you guys are doing well.
We are, and we're doing even better now that you're back on the show here. And I just want to run into just get right into what the issue here is. We've been talking a lot, everybody has, about that strike. So I think everybody's pretty much aware of what happened right now. What everybody is waiting for, though, is what's going to happen in response. And the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, is in town today and was in the White House visiting with President Trump for the first time since he has become chancellor. And in that, in the typical fashion that they do, they had some, I guess, about an hour in the Oval Office with the cameras rolling and talking about all different kinds of things. And in the course of that, and by the way, some of this video you're looking at here, this is some new video of that attack where the Ukraine side released even more information they had. And there's actually some pretty fascinating views on some of this, as some of the drones were flying around under the planes even before they launched. But that's all good video for the West, but that could portend some pretty negative things. And President Trump today talked about that issue, about what Putin told him on the phone.
He got hit. He's been doing hitting, so I understand it. But he got hit hard. And I don't think he's playing games. I think I've always said he wanted the whole thing. I thought he wanted the entire, everything having to do with Ukraine.
Saying that America is again in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war. So let's talk about what we can do jointly, and we are ready to do what we can. And you know that we gave support to Ukraine, and that we are looking for more pressure on Russia. The European Union did, and we should talk about that.
We will talk about it. When I see the moment when we're not going to make a deal, when this thing won't stop, if that moment, yeah, it's in my brain, the deadline. When I see the moment where it's not going to stop, and I'm sure you're going to do the same thing, will be very, very, very tough. And it could be on both countries, to be honest. You know, it takes two to tango. But we're going to be very tough. Whether it's Russia or anybody else, we're going to be very tough. That's a bloodbath that's going on over there.
So there's at least three major elements in that video I want to get to at the first, and we're going to start with the one about Putin, since that's kind of where we titled this. Then that Putin is going to act, and it was interesting to me, both in the Truth Social that Trump posted yesterday, as well as his comments here, is that he did at one point say in the conversation that we didn't get a recording of, where he said, I told him he shouldn't do it, but he's going to do it here. And he didn't say anything in the Truth Social or elsewhere that he said, if you do it, I'm going to take X, Y, and Z countermeasures. He just said, he's mad, he's going to do it. What do you take from where Putin is, and what do you expect to happen?
I expect Russia to respond in the way they've always responded to these provocations. And they're going to do it very deliberately. It's going to be measured. It's going to be pragmatic. And so Russia's behavior is pretty predictable as an international actor, both politically and also militarily, in the framework of what they're calling a special military operation. Now, this is a level of provocation that has exceeded anything that we've seen before. However, exactly a year ago, Daniel, you remember that Ukraine launched attacks that hit nuclear early warning radar systems in the Orsk region. This is just on the western border of Kazakhstan, 1,500 kilometers inland in Russia. And that was right before the Zurich scheduled so-called peace summit that Zelensky was hosting. And there was obviously no chance that Russia would show up to anything like that, especially after hitting their nuclear deterrent early warning radar system. So here we have a repeat. The timing of this, of course, is no coincidence. So I'm really looking also at the political side of it right now. And so I expect Russia to do what Russia normally does, play it by the book. And they're going to, if they have to send a clear message to Ukraine and maybe to the United States, they're going to do it in the way that they see fit. What I see is consistency on the Russian side, and we see inconsistency on the Trump side. It was just a month ago, they're saying, we're going to back off. We're going to wash our hands with it. If Ukraine and the Europeans can't figure this out with Russia, we're just going to walk away. And now all of a sudden it's no, we're going to hit back hard. We're going to do something very strong if Russia doesn't submit to the will of the United States. They're all over the place. So Russia's just looking at this, and this has basically reinforced whatever ideas that Russia had before, that the United States is completely unreliable, totally inconsistent. And, you know, to think that the U.S. had no knowledge of this attack right before the Istanbul summit, it's not credible. So, you know, where is the U.S.? So can they play aloof? Trump say, I had no idea about the assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin's helicopter. I had no idea about these drone strikes. And this is the same president that constantly has been saying, this war would never have happened if I was president. It's Biden's war. Well, Trump, you're president now. And this stuff is happening. So you can't have it both ways. So I mean, Russia and other serious actors, China, they're looking at this thinking, what's going on in Washington? Who's in charge? Lindsey Graham, meanwhile, is gallivanting between Kiev and Washington. Mike Pompeo's gallivanting around Odessa, flexing in Kiev. Basically, so they're sending out the dogs of war there, as far as I can see, and that's also sending a message. So don't you think that's a bad idea? If Trump is really in control, wouldn't he want to rein in the likes of Lindsey Graham so as not to antagonize negotiations and show goodwill? Or is that not in the calculus? So what's this all about besides political theater and perhaps, you know, accidentally slipping into a potential major war with a nuclear adversary? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you know, that's one thing that's puzzled us here on the show a lot too, because we really hit it hard. And what you're talking about there, that process began almost 2 months ago on April the 18th, to be specific, when the Secretary of State came out and said that, look, we are days away from walking if the two sides can't come together or whatever. And then that went on till I think April 29th. He said it again May 4th when Trump said it on NBC News. Then a little over 2 weeks ago, he came back and said, well, all right, within a couple weeks, I'm going to know. And then it's past 2 weeks. And you heard him say just there a second ago, well, there's a deadline in my head. I know, but no, obviously no one's going to take that seriously at all anymore. And you mentioned there about Zelensky and Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal. And Pompeo actually missed that one. That one's new to me. But here's one, Gary. I'm going to pull this a little bit out of order. I think it's lower down on the list. Here is Jack Keane, who seems to want to go to Biden too. He wants to go back to where Biden was, and he's trying to pull Trump in that same direction. Watch this.
So the leverage has got to be, I think, number one, military assistance, and give them the robust air defense systems and the other things they desperately need. Why is that? Because once Putin sees that the United States is still committed to Ukraine, he knows he can't achieve victory. The evidence is already right in front of us. We're 39 months into the war, Maria. 39 long months. That's how much time it took for us to defeat Nazi Germany. And Putin has not succeeded. He hasn't even taken the entire Donbass region, which is what he wanted to take in 2014. So he cannot succeed if the United States is providing military assistance. He knows that for a fact. Second thing, let's issue the crippling sanctions. That is all part of the process.
So let me just ask you, just off the cuff, there is General Jack Keane, who was the 4-star general, the vice chief of staff of the U.S. Army, like whatever it was, 30-something years of experience. I can't remember exactly how far. And he says that Russia can't win. And if all Trump has to do is to go back and do what Biden did, and then somehow there'll be a different outcome. How does that work?
So there's no material difference here with what's going on from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. I mean, look at what's happening on the ground. Maybe the only material difference is Russia's made advances across the front line in a number of areas, and Ukraine's continued doing the same hit and run, British and U.S. backed, U.S. intelligence, British engineering backed hit and run sabotage operations to derail any potential negotiations. It's kind of obvious the pattern. It's not as if you couldn't figure this out. And I often wonder, is the U.S. just using Britain and some of its European partners to have some plausible deniability, having them run the physical operations while providing the ISR, providing the targeting assistance and the intelligence with the Ukrainian SBU, because they are integrated. That's been admitted. The CIA, British intelligence, and the Ukrainian SBU, it's integrated. So it's not like the U.S. isn't involved, but these types of things are guaranteed to derail negotiations. So Russia knows this. They're not naive. They've been around the block now enough times with the U.S. and two different presidents to sort of work out all the different permutations of what the U.S. and its allies are pretending to do or trying to do already. So what Jack Keen's saying, you're absolutely right, Daniel, is default back to Biden, which is that means this could go on for a very long time. And they think that they can do death by 1,000 cuts with Russia by doing drone swarms. By the way, that was the centerpiece of the British Strategic Defense Review last week, was called Kill Web. And the Ukrainians' operation was called Spider Web and was the exact same program. I don't believe in coincidences like that. That was so I think that's a good indication of where they want to take this conflict. And it does make sense. This is kind of normal U.S. Maximum pressure, long-term regime change kind of operations where we're going to keep the pressure on and we're going to whittle down the, quote, regime. And they think because they managed to do this in Syria and other places that somehow it's going to work with the Russian Federation. I'm sorry. It's a different sort of thing. I think one of the big problems, though, Danny, that has to be addressed is, and you can hear it through Jack Keen and Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal and everybody else, is this kind of, they have their own version of history. They have their own interpretation of the events that brought us up to this point in history. And to see saying, well, Putin wanted to take the whole of Donbass and he hasn't done that yet, not articulating the reasons why Russia hasn't taken the whole of Donbass. They also say that Russia's lost 85% of the territory they initially took when they surrounded Kiev back. You see that old trope in March of 2022, and they've only got 18% of the original territory. I mean, these are semantic games that they keep playing, and all of their assumptions are completely erroneous. That Russia's motivation is to steamroll Ukraine and then on to Europe. And Trump is playing this as well, saying, oh, Putin wants all of Ukraine, all of Ukraine. Where did he get this? Was this told to him by Dan Scavino over a beer or McDonald's, or where did he get this idea? Oh, I heard it from a guy that Putin wants all of Ukraine. One of my buddies, somebody who told me before I clocked out yesterday. I don't know, but you can't run foreign policy like this on talking points that are there is no good policy that's going to come out. You cannot engage in negotiations. There is no strategy. There is no policy, because if the assumptions that you're basing all of your moves and actions on are erroneous and fake and not based on what's actually happened historically, then how can you expect to get any results at the end? This is the difference between this administration and previous administrations. And I'm even going to say that the Obama administration is looking like the Einstein Brain Trust and compared to Trump right now. And Jimmy Carter's administration, I would give anything to bring that team back right now.
Wow, that's really saying a lot. And, you talk about some of the faulty inputs. I don't know if you saw, I guess it was 2 days ago in the New York Times, that they came out and they revealed that the Russian side had over 1 million casualties and the Ukraine side had only 400,000.
That's a big one. That's a really important one, Danny, because the death count, the casualty count, is a big political catalyst to policy, because the U.S. can't domestically say that Ukraine has lost more than Russia, because that's just absolute suicide politically for everything, all the sunken cost into this conflict. So they're telling this lie to each other and to the domestic U.S. and European and intra-NATO conversation. They can't admit the true casualty numbers. They don't want to know the true casualty numbers because it changes the whole picture in terms of getting public consensus and making this a moral war for good versus evil and democracy. Well, wasting 1 million Ukrainian young men at the altar of NATO's vanity project isn't exactly a good sell to democratic Europe either. And that's why they've
but
kept
you know
the
what is a
kibosh
good
on it.
sell is that not only has the Ukraine side not as many casualties, but you have caused 1 million casualties on the Russian side, and that sells too. So that is a double benefit for the war hawkers who want to keep this going on. And I agree with you entirely. It's a calculated political decision. I doubt very seriously that was just the Ukraine side, or the New York Times just came up with this idea on their own. I'm pretty sure they were fed it by somebody. I don't know who. I don't have that kind of information. But that also kind of leads back into this third thing on that Trump soundbite I wanted to talk about was the merits, right? So he's coming in along with, and now he's representing the senior European leaders. And he's telling Trump right there, even though he knows for sure that Trump is trying to get this war over, he again in front of the cameras says, yeah, I want you to put more pressure on Vladimir Putin. We want to see if we can help them. And you look at, we did a show on merits earlier today, and we talked about some of his comments where he still has these fantasies, along with others in NATO, that Russia can lose still. And so there's that pressure. The question is going to be, is Trump in charge? Is he going to be able to say and tell him just be quiet and go back to Germany or something? Or is he going to continue to vacillate between all these different ideas? I don't have a good feeling about that.
I think he's going to continue to vacillate, Daniel, because I'm looking at the behavior, record of behavior. I'm looking at the statements from not just Trump, but Marco Rubio, Trump's team, Kellogg, Steve Witkoff, everybody. And I'm seeing this pattern behavior that shows total incoherence. And I've not heard anything that even remotely approaches the true state of affairs, and from any of them. And maybe there's a few on the sidelines where you might hear some intelligent commentary, and maybe on an interview or something like that. But within the context of the policy making in Washington, I don't see it. So this is a problem. Okay, and here's the paradox. Okay, under Biden, NATO was a dangerous leviathan. Okay. And under Trump, the hope was, when he came in, the goodwill with him, he came in with a lot of goodwill under him, like a magic carpet, okay? And it was that Trump was going to, bring this war to an end, come to some kind of a decent relationship with a major superpower like Russia, and somehow, this whole Zelensky roadshow is just going to have to be, this is the final season of Servant of the People. It's over, right? That was the hope, okay? He has extinguished and spent all of that goodwill in 4 months with no tangible results at all. And the problem is the U.S. can't shirk their duties as a world superpower. As the head of NATO, the U.S. cannot leave this to the devices of European smaller and lower and medium tier powers, because history has shown what happens when you do that. And unless the U.S. takes a decisive position with the other major superpowers to come to a stabilizing agreement, the potential for nefarious actors to fill the vacuum of power. And let me tell you, I do not see Trump as a strong leader right now. I see Donald Trump as very weak, okay? Very weak, without strategy, without any clear vision, no U.S. foreign policy, no grand strategy, nothing. It's just that you've got to bend to our will and do what we say. Otherwise, it's going to be trouble, and I'm going to be upset. And if you don't submit to my will, that's not strategy. That's not policy. That's not foreign policy. So the U.S. needs to step up. If Trump can't do it intellectually, he's got to have a team around him that can pull that off. Not just this. they're balancing plates. They're balancing the Iran talks, plus the Israel-Gaza situation, plus Ukraine-Russia. So there's some big, important plates in the air right now. And they're very close to basically fumbling and dropping all of them.
Yeah, and you got to add the Indo-Pacific plates as well, because that's also on the being spun up there at the same time. You talk about the U.S. doesn't have a strategy, doesn't seem to know where it's going to go. That can't be said of the Russian leader, who seems very focused on what he wants to do and what he wants to accomplish, and has been pretty consistent from the beginning all the way through today. So Trump mentioned that he had talked to him on the phone. And for those who may have missed it, here is how Putin responded. Apparently, just shortly after this phone call, he went on Russian media and said this.
It was a deliberate strike, and it only confirms our suspicions that the illegitimate regime in Kiev that came to power through a coup is now being reborn as a terrorist organization, and its sponsors become supporters of terrorism. Recently, the Ukrainian government and their allies dreamt of inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield. Now they're withdrawing from the battle zone, fleeing, and now the Kiev regime is trying to resort to terrorist attacks. At the same time, they're asking for a ceasefire. They're asking for top-level meetings. But how can we organize such meetings when something like this is happening? What is there to talk about? How can we negotiate with those who are resorting to terrorism? And why should we reward them with a cessation in hostilities, allowing them to receive additional weapons, to continue their mobilization and to prepare for more terrorist attacks like those in the Bryansk and Kursk regions?
So I thought that was more important than just saying that they're going to respond because of what happened to their bomber fleet with the deep strikes and the drones, et cetera. But he has changed his tone on the Zelensky himself, because previously he had said, well, I'm not sure that we can sign a document with him because he's illegitimate. He went past his term of service. We can talk to him, but in terms of signing a final document, it's going to have to be somebody else and all this other kind of stuff. Now he's saying he is totally illegitimate and a terrorist leader. First of all, what do you make of this change?
Well, yeah, definitely the patience for entertaining the possibility of having some kind of an interim agreement with a lame duck, Zelensky, he's out of his democratic mandate. They previously said that, until there's elections and there's a definitive result, we can't get into any major binding agreement with Ukraine over this. So that was a prerequisite. They kind of, with Trump coming in and the whirlwind of diplomacy and Steve Witkoff's, shuttle diplomacy, they've sort of waived that prerequisite for elections for the time being. But now it's gone beyond that. Now it's like, just imagine this. The United States is backing, as an example, the United States is backing Israel to the hilt. And they gave pretty much the green light for Israel to take out the leader of Hezbollah and take out a whole city block to get one guy that arguably hasn't done even a fraction of what Ukraine has done inside mainland Russia. Okay, if you want to call these terrorist attacks legitimate military targets, whichever, but it's being interpreted from Russia as sabotage, terrorism, bridges, things like that. So Russia has the ability to basically take out the underground bunker wherever Zelensky is in Kiev or Lviv, and they probably, according to U.S. previous logic and doctrines and how they, what they think is permissible in military situations, would be totally justified to do just that, to take out Zelensky for what he has done and sending a strong message to the rest of the Ukrainian leadership. That's what's going to happen unless you get serious about trying to wind this thing down. And so that's where things could go. I don't think it's going to go because obviously Russia's very hypersensitive about civilian casualties. I know me saying that's probably going to trigger some people, but look at the record. The record is unbelievable. Like the It's the lowest level of civilian casualties for any conflict of this scale of conventional warfare.
Yeah, I mean, all you got to do is frankly, you just look at the Israeli-Hamas fight and how many civilians have died in that, versus how many in this alleged full-scale war over a 2,000-kilometer front line scale in north to south. But anyway, I don't want to get distracted at that. But the other thing that I did want to talk about, though, from that soundbite from Putin, was that not only did he change on Zelensky himself, but then he said, you guys are wanting a ceasefire to stop fighting for some period of time. Why would I do that when it's only going to help you? Which implies, if you're not going to negotiate with this now, what you consider a terrorist regime, you're also not going to ceasefire, then that sounds like the only thing that they're even talking about right now is moving forward on the military front.
It's just reiterated Russia's resolve that there's not going to be a negotiation path to settling this. It's going to be settled on the battlefield. It's just reiterating that belief, I think, on the Russian side, that U.S. is not agreement capable. The U.S. is not negotiations capable. Forget about coming to agreement. They can't even conduct coherent negotiations. This is a circus. What is going on here? It's kind of embarrassing, and it makes Tony Blinken look professional. That's how bad it is.
Oh, man.
So I know that's a heavy statement, Daniel, but I don't say that lightly, but that's kind of like where things are at right now, as far as I can see, and I'm sure Russia's not impressed. So this means that, and the U.S. will not be honest, neither will the Europeans. They'll blame Russia for their aggression after this attack on Russia's nuclear deterrent. If anybody touched the U.S.'s nuclear deterrent anywhere in the world, even Incirlik Air Force Base, that's DEFCON 1. Immediately, they're going into war mode. No question about it. The media will be behind them. Flags are out. It's over. Okay, so Russia's in a much more sensitive position because of the geography of this part of the world and the history. When is the United States going to appreciate that Russia is not protected by two oceans, and this is a hostile neighborhood with the United States right up in their grill through NATO?
Of course, we know the answer is never. But it doesn't, whether we recognize it or not, doesn't change the fact that it is recognized across the board in Russia. But you talked about a second ago about people who are detached from reality or who are all over the place and who are focused. It's not just Putin is focused. You know who else is focused, and the facts don't seem to dissuade him at all, and that's his counterpart in Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, who this morning was talking to a group of folks there and kind of laying out how he sees the world.
I believe that the first Istanbul is no different from the second Istanbul. The same ultimatum things that they said out loud at the time, here they presented it all in paper. The same as it was in the first Istanbul. It's the same today on this paper. That is, it is not a doable document.
So thanks, Gary, for putting that up. I was about to ask for that. He's wrong on a couple of points, just factually. This is not the same deal that was on the table in Istanbul 1. It was a lot more beneficial to the Kiev side by far than this one is going to here. This is basically terms of surrender. I mean, let's just be honest with it. That's what this is. But what Zelensky said at the end, that it's not a doable document. It's not a doable document if you want to survive, because if you give in to that, well, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. If you give in to that, you can survive as a political entity. You can still have some ability to have a functioning state, to have interactions with other countries, et cetera. There's real limitations on that, especially militarily and security-wise, but there will still be a Ukraine that still has territory remaining. But if he ignores this one like he did the first one, and this is what I really want to camp on for a second, by saying no to Istanbul 1 because it was undoable, he has condemned hundreds of thousands of Ukraine men to unnecessary and pointless deaths. If he agreed to this one, then all of those deaths will be exposed as having been pointless, which they already were anyway. But by saying no to this, I mean, you just said it yourself, Patrick. I mean, the only alternative you're leaving Russia left is just keep marching down the streets until they end up in Kiev.
They're kind of giving him no choice. Hearing Zelensky's statement there kind of really shows that he himself is very disingenuous, or he's completely clueless about the difference between these agreements. And if you look at the latest one, it's not that much materially different than the letter drafted by Russia to the U.S. Secretary of State in December of 2021.
2021.
So the first section, the political settlements, neutrality, NATO, all these big, and these are the most important things that need to be nailed down, because all the ceasefire technicalities, timelines, that's all secondary. That comes after the agreement on the main issues, and then you can go forward with the technical side. So, but they want to do it back to front with Ukraine and the United States. So they're kind of ignoring, dismissing the core issues for the Russian Federation, which this is no surprise. They've been on the table now for like 4 years, nearly 4 years. So if those aren't addressed, then Russia's going to be like, well, we don't have a partner that we can negotiate with. But that's the language the Russians used to use, our partners. You remember, they used to use these, our American, even when the U.S. was sanctioning them, demonizing them, our partners. And then Sergei Lavrov stopped using that language at some point. I think it was probably like 18 months into the Ukraine conflict, and all of a sudden the niceties weren't there anymore. Now this is taking it to another level. You're talking about careening towards a nuclear confrontation. And if Trump thinks he's going to play chicken with the Russians, and that's a really smart thing to do as a U.S. president, and the Europeans think that's a really wise thing to do, because Europe will take the brunt of any escalation, not the United States. So I mean,
well, and let me just tag on right there, because we have an answer today. Earlier today in a NATO meeting, you had the General Secretary, Mark Rutte, is all about expanding new military capacity to continue to confront Russia.
That will be a considerable extra investment. And this is why I predict that in The Hague we will decide on a much higher spending target for all the nations in NATO. Because we have to invest in our air defense systems, we have to invest in our, let's say, long-range missiles, we have to invest in our maneuverable land formations, command and control systems. All of this has to happen. And these mean huge investments. We need all over NATO territory. And by the way, doing this will also equalize what we are spending with what the United States is spending. We, Canada and Europe, equalizing with the US. And we know this is important because we want a fairer NATO where all our allies spend the same.
And so, no one in Europe is talking anything at all about diplomacy. Nobody's seeking any chance. Nobody. The only thing they're doing is Patrick is saying, Russia, we want you to surrender. We want you from a position of power and strength to submit to what Zelensky wants, and we want you to live with it. And of course, that's absurd, and nobody would ever do that. So the only thing that we're doing is giving Russia even more incentive to continue to build up their military power beyond what happens in Ukraine.
Yeah, I don't know what Mark Rutte's military experience is. I'm guessing none. Maybe he did some mandatory 1 year or something in the Dutch army. I have no idea. But what I hear there is like him and the rest of the European Eurocrats are basically have just taken Nancy Pelosi's day trading course, and they're just hyping up European defense stocks, because those are booming, by the way. So even him making that speech means that a whole bevy of European defense stocks are going to be going up today and tomorrow again, as they have done for the last 3 months. So people are making a lot of money off this. So where's the money coming from? Remember the proposal before Merz, after the election, before he became chancellor, they're talking about an 800 euro fund for to rebuild Europe and Germany's military and so forth. Turns out the money just wasn't there. So they'd have to go and basically increase their deficit spending. They'd have to borrow from the central banks. They'd have to impose austerity, which is a big deal in Europe with all the social services and things that are, part and parcel of European post-World War II peace dividend society. That would have to be cut into. And so the money's not there. But it's going to have to be debt. And the European economy is already on the slide. And to top it off, they're wanting to impose a whole another round of sanctions, not just against Russia, but against anybody who is trading with Russia or buying oil from Russia. like India, for instance, and China, and a number of other. This is going to cause a lot more problems, as well as the tariff wars. That's also stagnated global trade. So Europe's economy overall, it just gets worse and worse. And all these politicians and bureaucrats like Mark Rutte, all they're talking about is that we need to build up defense. We need to hit 5% GDP, 3% GDP, or whatever. When your GDP is lowering, it's probably not a big deal, you know?
Right.
So, because their GDP is, the projection for Europe is 0 this year, 0 growth.
Wow.
It's the same as last year, and
Isn't it
pretty
like
close
4%
to,
in Russia?
yeah, something like that, 3.5, 4%, which is huge compared to Europe. Europe's 0, 2 years running, in real economic terms. Plus, you have the advantage in Russia of relative purchasing parity power, where you get more for your, for your money in Russia. But so, I mean, I'm not impressed. And Rutte, he also said that NATO is the greatest empires, greater than the Roman and Napoleonic empires. And he said that 2 days ago.
Oh, Lord. I did
And
not
I'm
see
like,
that.
that's not a very good comparison. And neither is Zelensky's Pearl Harbor either, because that's not a very good omen historically either. But
No, I saw, in fact, on the Russian Military Review channel, somebody posted an article, I guess it's about 3 days ago or 2 days ago, that said, yeah, this is Russia's Pearl Harbor. Now we're ready for the Battle of Midway. So that's not a good thing. If you don't want to be on the receiving end of a bad Midway battle, in case those who don't know.
This is like comic book politics. They're just cherry picking terms and sound bites. It was a great PR victory for Ukraine, no doubt about it. Great publicity internationally, this raid, as well as the raid on the Kerch Strait Bridge that connects Crimea to Russia. Great, huge public relations victory. But substantially, what does it change on the ground in Ukraine, along the front lines, etc.? Is it putting them in a stronger or a weaker position? Could they be really devastated by another round of Kinshaus and Oreshnik missiles? Could Russia pull rank and use a tactical nuclear weapon at some point? And then where are we there? Is that what they want? Is that what the U.S. wants? Is that what Europe wants? Do they want to escalate? It looks like they want to escalate. It really does. It really does. This is not a bluff.
And when you have all that kind of talk that you just mentioned about there, who's going to be the biggest benefactor of that, and who loves it the most, except Zelensky? And he seems to be thinking that, yeah, I've got all these NATO guys on my shoulders. So here's what he said actually just a few days ago.
Europe, together with America, has better weapons than Russia. We also have stronger tactical solutions. Our Operation Spiderweb yesterday proved that. Russia must feel what its losses mean. That is what will push it toward diplomacy. And when Russia takes losses in this war, it's obvious to everyone that Ukraine is the one holding the line, not just for itself, but for all of Europe.
Yeah, push Russia into peace. I mean, the only thing you can push Russia into and the only thing I think is push them into more kinetic operations. And we may be on the verge of seeing that. I mean, I've seen a lot of people speculate about what Russia may do. They're going to do something big, and I can't imagine that Putin would go to the trouble to say that to Trump if it was just going to be another wave of drone and missile strikes like they've been doing all the time. So it seems like it's going to have to be something more than that. But Patrick, I mean, you just said it yourself a second ago. This is only going to have one end if we don't go down the off ramps that are available.
Yeah, you can't push. You can't use aggression to push the other side to diplomacy. Zelensky is delusional there, especially if the other side is more powerful, has greater strategic depth, and is actually winning. You can't. This doesn't work. I don't know what world he's in, but he is being pumped up by all these European leaders who agree with him. They agree with him, and they're all basically singing the same delusional tune. They really believe. You know, Zelensky is his position in Ukraine is so tenuous, and his whole raison d'etre right now to the far right in Ukraine, to the sort of Pravi sector Nazi sort of brigades who are all basically still on life support with Western money day to day, is that he is the cash cow. Zelensky is the cash cow. He is the goose that lays the golden egg for all of these factions in Ukraine. So when he goes out there, all his speeches are performative. Everything he does is about fundraising. And that's weapons, that's money, that's whatever. That's what he's all about. So although they're losing all these men on the front line and losing the battle militarily, he's winning the financial battle day by day for his base and the people that are allowing him to stay in power. So because they believe that he is the ultimate fundraiser, that he parades around the world and he comes back with the goods. The minute he doesn't come back with the goods is the minute his time is over.
Yeah, I mean, we just got to say this out loud. I mean, that is one of the most heinous and immoral things that any human can do, is to support something that works really good for the pocketbook when it's getting people slaughtered by the thousands. I mean, that's what's happening.
Yeah, and forced conscription. Everyone's seen the videos.
Oh yeah, they're just throwing them to death. That is my number one driver why I'm so adamant that we need to get this war over with. That Trump should have said back in April. He should have done it earlier when he first came to office, but for sure in April he should have just said, no, we're walking away. We're not going to underwrite failure and disaster. You guys either do it on your own or figure it out and negotiate it, but we're not going to support more death for Ukrainian people. That would have been something you could have defended that. But this, whatever we're doing now, just continuing on, asking NATO to, spend more money, et cetera, and telling Ukraine one thing and Europe another, and apparently Trump something or Putin something different. All it's doing is continuing the war and it's perpetuating. We're not doing anything to end it. That's the bottom line.
Something quickly, I spoke to a Ukrainian refugee who's in Europe recently, and his attitude has changed over the last 2 years about his country. And this is a grown man, in his 30s, and he doesn't believe there's a place in Ukrainian society for him in the future, because he doesn't believe in Ukrainian society because of what's happened over the last 3 years. And while he was on the side of Zelensky before, and while he was supporting NATO and the effort to, punch the Russians in the nose, he doesn't believe that anymore. So, that's just a little canary in the coal mine anecdotal story that I experienced. But I would imagine you could see that happening right across Europe.
Man, I'm just already amazed. Gary found something else amazing that basically an Uber Eats guy came to deliver some food, and then they grabbed him right there and just took him off to the front. That's what passes for mobilization in the democracy of Ukraine. But anyway, we'll just have to keep watching and seeing where this is going. I think it's pretty evident where it is going to go, but we're going to wait to find out at least what the next round is and what Putin ends up doing. In the last amount of time we have you before we let you go, I want to talk about something I know is really something you have a lot of passion about, and that is in the Israeli Gaza situation. There was some hubbub, I think, on the 27th of May when Friedrich Merz, the new chancellor of Germany, said something that no other German leader had said, was kind of a taboo thing, to actually had the audacity to say something bad about what the Israeli government was doing. And he said this is starvation of Gaza people is just awful. And it's something that can't be sustained by the claim that they're going after Hamas and the military, et cetera. Well, the foreign minister for Israel got together with the German foreign minister today in Berlin, which it was kind of like, well, let's see if we can talk about this. But instead, it seemed to me that the Israeli side cowed the German side. Number one, they got the German foreign minister to admit there that basically there won't be a two-state solution until Israel and Palestine get together, i.e. there will never be one, because he said it would be the wrong signal if we recognized a Palestinian state before. But then you had the Israeli foreign minister who came on and basically gave a huge mea culpa that went unchallenged. Here it was.
80 years after the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, unfortunately, has spread across the world, especially in Europe. 80 years after the Holocaust, the Jewish state is under an open threat to eliminate it. Hamas and the Houthis, Hezbollah, and above all, Iran, openly act to eliminate us. Yet, there are those who seek to turn the victim into the aggressor. Let me be clear. Hamas is the one solely responsible for the beginning of this war and also for its continuation. Hamas initiated this war. Only Hamas is responsible for the suffering of both Israelis and Palestinians.
So what do you make about that? That they're being unfairly treated, that the victim is now being treated as the aggressor? What say you?
I don't think anybody believes this anymore. I think that's a real desperate speech. But they're all basically, they have their talking points. All of the Israeli diplomats and at the UN and so forth. I mean, I'm watching the Piers Morgan's even had his Damascene conversion, and he's now advocating for a ceasefire. He is blaming Israel for genocide. He's even using the word now. So there's been a clear pivot and a shift in Western mainstream media, and with European leaders, especially U.S., a little bit slow on this. They'll probably eventually come around. I think people are becoming to realize there's also a number of legal cases. You know, it's funny. This is it's all about the money, Daniel, because why the UK suddenly pivoted is because of a whole string of legal actions by a number of NGOs and advocacy groups against the government for supplying arms against British law to Israel during using the weapons against civilians indiscriminately, plus tied to the cases in the international courts of justice and so forth. So I think there's the potential for liability now with all of these leaders and the fact they have been providing all this support for Israel when it's been known all the war crimes that have been happening. And so the ICJ ruling on the genocide convention, or whether it's officially genocide, is really a formality at this point because the evidence is overwhelming. And I think also Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia was actually very revealing, and not in the way that a lot of people think, in that it showed something, and it showed that the Gulf and the amount of money that the Gulf is prepared to invest in themselves, in Europe, in North America, is substantial. So, and it's the same with Asia and China. So where is the money now? Where's the economic center of gravity? It's moving east. And so Israel, why it was once an asset for the Anglo-American empire, if you will, and for transnational capital, for the oil industry, it served those interests for a very long time. Now it's no longer an asset. It's now a big liability because it's creating instability in a region that is now prepared for full investment and capitalization, modernization, so forth. And you can't just, if Israel thinks, and the U.S. too should take note, if Israel thinks it's going to march forward into the 21st century after what it has just done over the last 2 years, that is just delusional thinking. It's not going to be accepted in the community of nations, and it's not going to be accepted in the region. I'm talking about the government in Israel. I'm not talking about the Jewish people or anything like this. The government, the apartheid state in its current form, there is no future for it in the Middle East and really in the UN General Assembly and the global community. So there has to be political transformation or metamorphosis somehow that happens there without having World War III to move forward on that. That is just an inevitability. And at some point, the sanctions are coming. There's already a number of countries, Spain, Belgium, there's already initial sanctions on weapons, arms, and supplies of these sorts of things to Israel. That will then escalate to economic sanctions because the pressure is going to have to come from somewhere. There needs to be a pressure release valve for this because it's also delegitimizing these European countries and Western countries in all the things that they want to do with these Gulf states and Asia going into the future. So this is, sadly, it can't happen quick enough, Daniel. It really can't.
I just, and of course, I grieve first and foremost for the Palestinian people who've been suffering so egregiously from this from the beginning, both under, frankly, somewhat under Hamas as well, even before 10/7, but because of all the IDF and suppression that they've suffered. But now even the Israeli people that they think, and you look at the polls that have been coming out recently, large numbers of them agree with Netanyahu but they are all delusional in terms of thinking they can actually kill their way to security and peace. All they're doing is building up more insecurity for themselves. So in the end, everybody is going to lose with this until this gets over by one method or another. And I guess humanity and just history is going to have to handle this, but it can't come soon enough for me either, is the bottom line here.
No, the last thing I'll say on this, if you are wrapping it up, is that the situation right now in Gaza is so dire. It is so dire that these U.S. aid, this is a complete scam, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, with the United States, Israeli intelligence, admitted by Avigdor Lieberman that Mossad is funding this outfit. The United States, with a number of CIA operatives in the key positions, are basically have created 4 feeding points for Palestinians. Okay, they demonized UNRWA, the UN's work and relief agency. They accused them of being Hamas. UNRWA had 400 satellite kitchens throughout Gaza. They had hundreds of trucks coming in a day before October 7th. They had a whole system since the 1950s to provide food, medical care, education, counseling, all of these things. The United States under Joe Biden and Donald Trump and with Israel have crushed UNRWA. They've destroyed it, and they've created a situation now where people have to queue in the desert sun to get a box of pasta and who knows what sauce, and they're billing. Someone's being billed $100 million for each round of these so-called meals that they're talking about. And meanwhile, all the aid is backed up at the Rafah crossing. And the U.S. is poised to deliver. Israel has been blocking it for the most part of the last 20 months. So, and no one's being honest about this conversation because everyone's scared of the Israeli lobby. They're scared of the media. But the conversation is there are breaks happening. And I hope, Daniel, I really hope that when these breaks happen, as we see these cracks happening now in the information firewall,
right,
that people will take an honest look at what has happened over the last 20 months, and that the solutions are there, ready to go. They've always been there. The only thing that's been impeding it is Israel and the support the United States has given it, the political cover it's given it to create starvation. They're trying to force people south into kill zones, into effectively concentration camps, and then what? Bomb them? Whoever survives could get hit in tents or pushed out into the Sinai Desert. That's what they're saying openly in Israel that they want to see happen. So we're not making this up. We're not editorializing here. I'm going by top Israeli officials that's saying we are in the final 5 yards before the end zone on this. We're almost done with the job. And that's where things are at now. Just think about that for whoever's surviving in Gaza, that is the end game. Imagine where else would this be acceptable on this planet? I really, I just can't believe it.
Absolutely nowhere. There's no question about that. We've been beating that drum since this whole thing started, and we'll continue until, as you say, until something finally breaks through. And I think inevitably it will. It just can't come soon enough because there's people are dying every single day. But anyway, we're grateful for you to be shining a light on this. I know you covered a lot on your website, 21st Century Wire, and on your SundayWire.com. And so we just people who want to get more from Patrick on this, he's got tons of stuff on that website. Feel free to visit there. But for right now, we just thank you for coming on today. And
hey, not sure what happened here. Danny, you there?
Yeah, I am now. Did we play the jingle? Whoop, now I lost Gary. Are you still there, Patrick?
Yeah,
he is. You can wrap it up if you see us.
Oh, I thought we did. Everything went blank. I thought we ended it. Well,
we're still live right this second, so you can wrap.
Okay,
however you'd like.
Okay, this is what happens when you get live TV and you have some mechanical glitches. Thank you all for coming. Be sure and like and subscribe. And in the meantime, we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.